I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this session. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate being able to see you in a tiny little rectangle. I do, of course, wish we were all in person, but there's only so much we can do. My name is Alex Werenberg. In case you don't know me, my pronouns are he, him, his. I am a residence director at the College of New Jersey, and I am here to present Pretty Allied for a White Guy, Part 2. This is actually kind of a continuation on the same name presentation that I gave a few years ago at a different Makuho, and I wanted to expand upon it because we're in a different era now, and we need to do different work than we were doing back then. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kind of get through it. Thank you, Allie. I'm going to go ahead and get through it. Listen, y'all, Prezi is a trip, and we're going to work through it together, okay? So our plan for today is to obviously engage in discussion topics of anti-racism, activism, identities, privilege, all the good stuff. We'll expand our knowledge on current race-related issues, and then, of course, we'll be able to gain some tools necessary to fight oppressive powers, or at least I hope we can. So to start, to get in here, I see a few more people are kind of getting in here now. Like I said, I did a version of this called Pretty Allied for a White Guy. It was just called that. It wasn't 1.0, but in that version of this presentation, we talked about a few things, and I wanted to kind of give a refresher of what was shared there in case you weren't there, or if you were there, that's fine. I appreciate the support anyway. So we talked about definitions of key words and identities, obviously the word identity, intersectionality, salient identities. We talked a little bit about privilege and the opposite, marginalization and power, and how that affects those two. The term ally being a verb, not a noun. It's about the things you do. Now even the term ally is outdated. We'll get to that later. We talked about what you take with you when you enter a space, right? It's not just me, Alex, entering a room. It's me, Alex, the white cishet male who's got a lot of privileges, and I have to know what my privileges are in order to use them to help others and also not get in the way of others. Obviously, very important, listening to people's stories, challenging your beliefs and your privileges, getting out of your comfort zone. It's more than just, I went to a thing, I donated some money, right? You have to actually challenge yourself and get out there in order to be better. And then, of course, being aware of microaggressions, we talked a lot about in that presentation as well. With these thoughts right now, before we get even further, do I need to go over anything? Does anyone have any questions? I want this presentation to be somewhat interactive. You don't have to take yourself off mute. You can put stuff in the chat. Alex Reynolds and I will be looking at it pretty actively. So if anything comes up, feel free to share. But if there's anything that we need to go over right now, feel free to let me know. I'd be happy to talk about it. And if not, that's okay too. We got something in the chat here. Alex Squared, yes, that's us. We stick together. Salisbury Bloomsburg team. Yes, go us. Okay, I will move forward then to the next section. So we've got an opening activity here. I have created some breakout rooms, and I'm going to just make sure, yep, they're all good. And I'm going to send you into these breakout rooms in a second. And I want you to take a few minutes to answer the questions that are on the screen right. Y'all, I should have never done Prezi. That are right here. We're going to talk a little bit about respect. What does respect mean to you? And then if there's time in those 3 minutes, talk about race, racism, how does it make you feel? And then when was the last time you talked about those things? I will send these into your breakout room so you don't have to memorize these. So let me go ahead and open these breakout rooms and get y'all in there. Welcome back. Welcome back. Thomas, I love the new haircut.
Thanks. It's growing back really fast.
All right. It looks like people are starting to come back, which is great. If anyone feels like they are comfortable sharing, feel free. Again, throw it in the chat. Take yourself off mute. If you do, just like say your name real quick, just so we know who's talking. But I would love to hear from y'all. What does respect mean to you, and when do you talk about racism and stuff? Nothing? Y'all just spent the last 3 minutes looking at each other?
Well, my group was awesome. Very efficient, good use of time all around. We talked a lot about respect being like treating people how you want to be treated, golden rule type stuff. We also talked about how sometimes respect is like challenging others. Sometimes in order to respect a certain identity or a certain person, you have to challenge or sometimes call out or call in people. So sometimes the way you interact with others shows respect in a different way for someone else indirectly. Just one point we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. In the chat, Ali shared that Zach brought up a great point about finding out what it means to that person and give that to them. Something I learned when I was first starting out as an RA at Salisbury University. Shouts out. I learned about the golden rule is treat others how you want to be treated, and the platinum rule is treat others how they want to be treated. It's a little bit different because the way you'd want to be treated may be different than the way they need to be treated. Respect and civility. Yeah, absolutely. These are all great ideas. What other thoughts do we have about respect and or racism? Nothing, no thoughts. That's okay. We'll keep moving forward. If you have anything, again, feel free to share in the chat. The reason I wanted to talk about this was because kind of like what Amanda was just sharing, there are different versions of respect, and there are different ways to show respect to different people. Respect of a person as a human being is extremely different than respect of authority figure, a position, a title, something like that, right? That's two different versions of respect, but it's the same word, and we can get those kind of convoluted and confused. So that's why I want to talk about this. I don't want this to be we're respecting a position, we're respecting something kind of as it is. I want us to think about respecting people as people, right? It's extremely important to think about it that way. So we're going to move forward. And it's everyone's favorite day. We're going to bring in that video cart like in school, and we're going to talk about racism and anti-racism. I'm hoping the audio works.
So I have a question for you. Are you non or are you anti? Several months ago, in response to Ferguson, Baltimore, the killings of Freddie Gray and Tamir Rice, my friend Caitlin put up a Facebook post breaking down the difference between non-racism and anti-racism. Most of us are non-racist. Because racism is looked upon as some moral lapse, we feel quite self-assured by simply not being racist. I'm not a bigot. I don't sing that N-word when my favorite rap jam comes on. I didn't vote for that guy. I'm not burning any crosses. I'm not a skinhead. I don't, I won't, I'm not, I've never, I can't. What you end up with is an entire moral stance, an entire code for living your life and dealing with all the injustice in the world by not doing a damn thing. That's the great thing about none. You can pull it off by simply rolling over in your bed and going to sleep. So why are you sitting at home and watching things unfold on TV instead of doing something about it? Because you're a non-racist, not an anti-racist. Now do this for me. Take the C out of racist and replace it with a P. I'm not a rapist. I'm not friends with any rapist. I didn't buy that rapist last album. All these things that you're not doing. Meanwhile, people are still getting raped and black boys are being killed. It's not enough that you don't do these things. You're going to bed with a clear conscience is not going to stop college students from getting assaulted. You thinking climate change is terrible is not going to stop climate change. You being so assured that you're not anti-black, anti-Muslim won't stop the next hate crime. And it's wonderful that you recognize how brave gay people are when facing persecution, but they aren't the ones who need to be brave. We need to get active. We need to hold people accountable. We need to accept that what hurts one of us hurts all of us. And we need to stop thinking that injustice going on in the world isn't to an extent our fault. We need to stop being none and start being anti.
Racism is a business. For centuries.
Pause that. Alrighty. So that leads us into our discussion about anti-racism and, of course, all the other isms, sexism and the phobias and everything, right? I also wanted to include a couple quotes over here from some scholars in this field. Dr. Ibram Kendi, of course, shared that all policies, ideas, and people are either being racist or anti-racist. There's no in between. It's one or the other. If you're not supporting the cause to be anti-racist, then you're being non-racist, which again is kind of just being racist, right? In its own way, it's being passive. And of course, from Dr. Annalise Singh, you need the intentional mindset of, yep, this racism thing is everyone's problem, including mine, and I'm going to do something about it, right? So it's one thing to recognize that you need to be anti-racist, but it's another thing to recognize that I need to do something about this. I need to actually be active and make some work and do some work. I don't know where this last quote came from. It feels like one of those motivational posters, but it could be from someone very important, and I unfortunately don't know who it is. We're not all in the same boat, but we're in the same storm. We may not have the same resources, we may not have the same access, we may not have the same philosophies or drives, but we're still all fighting racism and bigotry and discrimination together. And that's kind of how we have to think about it. Are there any thoughts from any of this? Again, I like the being active and having this kind of be a discussion. I'll check the chat as well. A great video, thank you. I made it myself. Just kidding, I wish I did. Any thoughts about anti-racism so far? Any questions? Are you confused by any of these topics? It's okay if you are. This could be a new concept for you.
I think, Alex, one thing that I think about when I see this is something that Amanda always brings up to me when I'm in these things, because it seems to be my default. I go to a lot, like with the respect question of, everyone has value in all these things, and everyone, has the, and all that. But, when you look at these videos and you think about this, if some people's opinions and thoughts are that others, don't have value and don't have the right to exist, does that mean that you grant them the equal sharing of respect and everyone, deserves and has the right and all this, when that section, has those thoughts? And then what do you do? How do you take action on that? And I think that video really helps to hammer that home.
Yeah, thank you for that, Johnny. When I saw this video, I was like, it all makes so much sense now, right? Just change that C to a P and it makes so much more sense. I never even thought about it that way, right? And then you can think about it in any other way, by being sexist or homophobic, transphobic, whatever it may be, right? You may not be able to do the same wordplay, but you get my point.
I think it's something that I want to talk about just quickly.
Sure.
I think it's interesting to see how we've changed the words, changed our verbiage in talking about this, right? How we've gone from, okay, you're not an ally or you're not an advocate, you have to be anti-racist. And I think it brings light to the urgency and the necessity for change right now. Like, we obviously, things have needed to change for a long time and they haven't. And I feel like, scholars and other folks have maybe just been placating, and we've been using words to make us feel better, right? Like that white fragility piece of things. And now we're getting to the point where, like, no, you have to be anti-racist. There is no yes, like there is no maybes in this discussion. It's not even a discussion. Like this is an action, and we need to start taking part of it, and being a part of it to make this change. And so I think that that's something that I have just recently been thinking about, is how we've been changing the words, and it speaks to the urgency of this situation.
Absolutely. That's why I wanted to make this 2.0. And that's why there's so many presentations this year at Makuo that are on similar topics, right? This is an important discussion that needs to be talked about. And we can't sit by anymore and just let the conversation go by. We have to be a part of it. And we have to help others be a part of it too, right? It's not just for ourselves, it's for everyone else. We're all in this storm together, right? Okay, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about racism. Over here, I'm not going to read through all of this. It's just long definitions, but of course I included what the definition of racism is, and then kind of on both ends of the spectrum between structural racism, which is the sort of result of active racism that has since become more passive, that it's the system that it is, and it's the way things are. Like Dr. Kendi said, we have a lot of policies that are either pro or non-racist, and they don't help our cause. And then on the other end of that spectrum is race equity, right? The idea that your standing in society has nothing to do with your race or your identities or anything like that. And that's where we want to be, right? We want to be on that end of the spectrum. So how do we do that? What steps can we take? How do we get ourselves to a race equitable society? So I'm not the professional here. I'm not a professional. I've only done what work I've done myself. I understand the privileges that I walk into or come into every room. There was ableist of me already. Come into every room with. That's what I recognize that, and I want to show that I am at least using my position, my privileges, my education, whatever it may be, to help others, right? So like I said, I'm not a professional. I'm not going to have all the answers, but this is some of the information that I've come up with through various forms of research, both as observation and actual research. So finding and retaining equity champions, extremely important. Get people on your side who will also support the cause, right? Help them be more vocal as well, right? Join that team, get active, be involved in that way. Tori actually said this in the chat earlier, so I checked and I saw, don't be afraid to be wrong, but I'll add another step. Don't get defensive about it, right? If you get corrected, that hurt my feelings, that was a microaggression. Oh no, I didn't mean it like that, right? You're already taking a step backward. Understand that you're going to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you're not actively harming someone. And if you do make mistakes, recognize that and say, I apologize. I didn't know that that's what I'd said or done, and move forward from it, right? Misgendering someone, sharing microaggressions or macroaggressions, you can get past it. You just can't be defensive about it. Oh, I didn't mean it like that. Oh, you're just being soft. You're being, sensitive, whatever it may be. That's already taking steps backward. This is especially for our white folks in the room. You can ask questions of Black and Indigenous people of color, but you should try to be doing the work yourself. It can be extremely taxing to tell your story over and over and over again to all different kinds of people, right? It's one thing if they're your best friend in the whole world and you've known them for so long, but it can still be taxing. It's still a lot to talk about. It's still a lot to relive experiences, right? So put in the work yourself. Go to webinars, go to presentations like this and like other ones at this conference. Read, make sure you're reading from all types of sources, not just from Black folks, but make sure you're reading from LGBTQ plus folks and Indigenous folks and Latinx folks and everything like that, right? You want to get a wide, diverse information for you as you're doing your research. If you do get pushback, make sure you got to push through, right? We've seen it all over the place on social media or the one example that comes up to me, and it's not exactly on the same topic, but all those celebrities who sang Imagine to like help lift spirits at the beginning of this pandemic, and everyone's like, this is not what we needed right now. They tried their best. It may not have been the solution, but they were coming from a good place, and they wanted to help at the best that they could. Obviously, it was not the answer that they needed, but that's when you do your research and you realize, oh, this wasn't what people needed right now. Maybe I can do something else. Maybe I can donate to this, or maybe I can help with that, right? it goes back to the being defensive aspect, right? Don't get defensive about, well, we were just trying to make everyone feel good. Okay, you've already shut down the whole conversation. So make sure that if you do get pushed back, if someone says, oh, you're just, you're ruining the party, you're being a spoil sport, we're just trying to make jokes, whatever. Maybe those aren't your race equity champions that you want to be around, right? Stand up for people, especially on social media. If you're not going to change their mind, at least you're hopefully changing someone else's mind who's reading that comment. Being aware of micro and macro aggressions, I'll always support this. Not just in the room where people can be impacted by that, but in the room behind closed doors when you're of people of similar identities or of the same identity as yourself, right? If you're in that room and someone says something offensive, you can't just say, oh, well, no one was here to hear that, right? If a tree falls in the forest, it makes a sound because that tree is going to fall somewhere that's not in the forest and it's going to be a problem, right? So call people out and call people in, as Amanda said earlier, so that they feel, so that they know that it's wrong. Whether you change their mind is one thing, but at least you've done your part to at least put that in their head. And of course, don't call yourself an ally. Again, as I said earlier, ally is already kind of an outdated term. The terms advocate, I've heard accomplice, I've heard co-conspirator. I'm still getting used to those latter two, just because they have a negative connotation in my mind, but it's just something that I'm going to even get used to. So I'm still doing that active work as well. But we use those terms because we're showing that we're putting in the active work. We're doing good trouble. I wish I could quote who said good trouble. If anyone knows, please throw it in the chat. I apologize. Whereas ally is just, I'm standing next to you and I'm going to support you, right? Being an accomplice is I'm doing it when you're not there. I'm helping you when you're not there. And then of course, don't call yourself an ally as well, just because it's an earned title. It's not something that you can say, oh yeah, I'm an ally. It's something that someone has to give you. Thank you, Joanna. It was John Lewis sharing good trouble. I appreciate that. Any questions or thoughts, confusion, anything about this that you want to share? Again, throw it in the chat, take yourself off mute, whatever works for you.
I was thinking about what you were saying, like the term ally is so loaded.
Yeah.
And that's a big piece of what my session, not to plug my session for tomorrow morning, but that term itself has just become so problematic. And I don't think it's the term as much as it is like having a term at all.
Sure.
Like is the big problem, right? People are so focused on like this label or this title instead of just doing the damn work, like just being better. And like I know this is kind of like an extreme point of view, but I see it as like an analogy of being like, if you think of like religion, right? So you might be Catholic or Jewish or something. And like when you go to like give yourself a title, I feel like the apples to apples comparison here is like calling yourself a saint. Like we're all on a journey, but like that's an impossible like goal. Like an ally, an accomplice, an advocate, whatever that is, like you can aim to do these things and like it'll get you a little less racist, a little less homophobic, a little less classist along the way, all these things, sure. But you're never really going to get there.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've achieved allyship. I am an ally. Job done, right?
No, none of us are.
Right.
We should all be trying, but we're not.
Always a work in progress. Good enough. Mm-hmm. That's why I always said that ally was a verb. It's the things that you do. It's not. It's not some noun that you can achieve. Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up. Like the problems with like the language here, and I think that's why it never sticks and it never feels like it's always changing, because there's not. The whole point is the problem is that we have a word that we're so like stuck on. Yeah,
it's always changing. The title of this presentation is already outdated, but the pun was so good I couldn't change it. Any other thoughts about how to be anti-racist? Have you done any of this work? Do you feel confident in this work? Is there anything that you feel like you can improve upon in this work now that you are reading it here on this screen or heard me say it?
I think, Alex, one thing that I've been sitting with all semester is that being anti-racist isn't always just about the external, but it's the work that you do internally as well.
Yeah.
So checking your own assumptions, your own biases, and that cycle of socialization, if you know what I'm talking about, it's like it's a circle.
Yeah.
So myself growing up in the great state of Maryland, Alex, as you know, and having that experience and then going into professional life and wondering, come to think of it, I've never had a doctor of color, for example. I've never had
Sure.
a professor or teacher that represents a different disability group, so to speak. So I think that's a part of the work of anti-racism, is the internal and the reflection.
Yeah. Thinking I've done activities in the past where I'm having a discussion among people, and the prompt is, what was the first impression or experience you had involving a person from the Pacific Islands? And it's like, I don't know. Can I even think of that? Right? You get like the more common, when was your first experience with, like Zach was saying, like a doctor who may have been Black or Latinx or whatever, or your first experience with someone who was LGBTQ plus, right? And then you think about all these other identities that exist too, and you're like, I don't know what my first experience was. Watching Rocket Power and seeing, I don't know what the answer to that question is. It's something that you really have to think about. Be aware of different identities and their intersectionalities too, right? It's not just one thing to be Black or Latinx or Asian, but to be a Black woman or a Latinx trans man, or whatever it may be. There's a lot that goes into every individual person. That goes back to my thought about treating and respecting people like people. Gullah Gullah Island, I mean, yeah, throwbacks to all these different programs back in the day. Now we've got so much more representation for children, which is great. But it's one of those things, again, with this conversation, it's too little too late. We need to start having it right now. We need to start having it yesterday, right? So we'll move forward. I'm going to put y'all back into your breakout rooms, and we're going to have a different discussion. I was told that my information as I was sharing it would just disappear very quickly. So I'm going to just keep spamming your room with this information so that you can keep seeing it. But I'm going to send you back into your breakout rooms, and I want you to try to work with your team to develop an ideal community, whatever that means for your group. Something that values diversity. How does it look? Who's involved? What needs to be introduced? What needs to be started? Try to list 3 action items for yourself among your team. I know that this may not be a lot of time. I'll try to give you a little more time if possible, but we're already a little over halfway, and we're getting close to the end, so maybe I can give you a little more time. But so I'm going to send you back into your groups, and I'll copy this information in there, and then we'll come back out and we'll share. So let me open up these rooms. See you in 10 or whatever. welcome back. Alex looks stressed. Alex, why are you so hot? Why are you so hot over there?
I don't know. I mean, I'm just great looking.
I like the bow tie, Alex.
Thanks. I am wearing athletic shorts on
So
bottom, so don't even worry about it.
I wore a suit yesterday to a work meeting and had like shorts on too. So
yeah, no hard pants for me.
No. It's going to be really hard to get back to normal, though.
Honestly, I'm not ready for that.
No.
All right, we're getting some people streaming back in. I think we're close to everybody. So feel free to share. What does your ideal community look like? What goes into it? What steps are needed? And then as you're listening, think, could that be incorporated into our group's plan? Feel free to share. Representative bureaucracy. Would you like to elaborate on that, Allie and Allie's group?
Sure. It's a term I learned about in grad school during Oregon admin, specifically when I was writing about the lack of racial diversity in student affairs professionals. And so representative bureaucracies are leadership and systems that are built to look like its members. So if we know that our student bodies, and I said this in our group, and our country as a whole, folks who are not white are making up more of our populations, then that's what our leadership should look like. So it should be representative of who we are serving.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, for elaborating. What other groups? I know that there were 2 other groups, and I'll call on people. Don't test me. I will.
Our group talked about the need for universal design.
Okay.
And that communities need to be inclusive and reflect the larger group, the larger society, and that we need to have very good leadership in our community.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the need to find the money and to do that, write grants, which we in residence-life housing don't necessarily do as often as we could and should be doing, particularly now with tight budgets. And then we had a question: are we talking about the ideal community based in the United States or the ideal community in the larger world? Because we tend to focus usually on the US. And with global pandemic and becoming more global citizens and globalization going on, maybe we need to expand how we look at our community. And that one of the action items besides finding the money, got to build trust.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Joanne. We had one more group. I don't know who it was, but want to share if you weren't involved with either Allie or Joanne. And if you don't, that's okay too. I think the most important thing, just to fill this dead air, I think the most important thing to think about is representation absolutely matters. And while that's true, we want to avoid tokenization, right? Don't hire someone who is Latinx just because they are, right? We want them to be a qualified candidate as well. Representation is absolutely important, but not at the expense of, oh, well, we have this person on our staff, so the work is complete, right? We've done what we needed to do. Something to think about as well. All right, we have one last thing, and I'm hoping it works. Technology, y'all know how it is, and then we can wrap this up. So in my research, I discovered the Race Card Project, who's by a journalist named Michelle Norris, and what they do is they go around and ask people for their thoughts on race in 6 words, right? Seems like it could be simple enough, but it really takes some thought. So hopefully you all are going to see this on your screen. Feel free to scan that QR code or go to Slido, slido.com, hit up that hashtag as your code, and then share what your thoughts are on race in 6 words. Not as easy as it seems. It could be your experience. It could be what you see in society. It could be a lot of different things. Hopefully we'll get some responses coming in soon. It's not great, but getting better. A thought, definitely. You all are able to see this screen, hopefully. Yep, okay, good. Shouldn't divide us, but celebrated together. Yeah, and this is, I don't even want to necessarily elaborate on this because I want this to be your thoughts, but I wanted to see it, and it's anonymous, so feel free to share what you want to share. Lots of work to do, absolutely. Social construct that creates unsurmountable barriers. Whoever wrote that has a command of the English language. I said 6 words and you said, let me find a thesaurus real quick. No, it's very good. Thank you. Still a problem for us. Absolutely. The work never stops. Keep going. That's what I wanted this presentation to be about, right? Constructed concept created to maintain power. That's absolutely true. It is structural and it's too much. It's gone too far, in my opinion. And it needs to be stopped. Both celebratory and decisive in places, sure, yeah. And we cannot ignore only celebrate. Alex W, you rock. That's only 4 words, but I do appreciate your thoughts. We cannot ignore only celebrate. I agree with that as well. Thank you for sharing all your thoughts. And you are more than welcome to keep adding to that or look up the Race Card Project. I'm going to go to my last slide here. I have a bunch of resources down here in the corner. You don't have to memorize them because this is being recorded, but those are a bunch of resources that I found through my research that can be useful to you. We also have our own anti-racism resources through Makuho. So check out all of those. And then of course, over here on the left side of the screen, follow that link or that QR code to assess this presentation. I appreciate any and all feedback. Thank you so much for coming today. Does anyone have any final thoughts or does want to share anything? I'm opening up the chat now. Great job. Thank you. I appreciate it. I know I wish I could spend an entire day, but y'all limited me to an hour. So here we are. No, I appreciate all of you joining in the conversation, and I'm hoping that we can keep this going. I'm actually going to stop share real quick so that I can see all of your beautiful faces. Hello, friends. Thank you all again for coming. Again, feel free to do that evaluation, and I will see you all in the rest of Makuho. Fortunately, I didn't have to lead into a presentation, so we can hang out if y'all want to. But again, I can't thank you enough. I appreciate it.